Thank you. And thank you for everybody that's joining us tonight, or everybody that's listening to this as we are recording it for folks to watch after the fact. Tonight, we're here to talk with the Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department. We're here to talk about the Energy Park proposal that is the easement, which is on the town meeting warrant coming up this weekend. So we decided we should hold a information session where we could talk a little bit about the Energy Park and try to answer any questions that we've already received and any questions that might come up tonight. So I thought it was useful to start with the informational video that we prepared if people haven't seen it. So Joe's going to load that up first, and then we will talk a little bit more about the park and then address some of the frequently asked questions that we've gotten so far, and then open it up to questions for any new questions or any other people that have questions. Joe, I can't hear the sound.
How about now?
No.
No?
I had this issue another time when we were trying to share it.
Joe, when you do your share, you might there's an option to say share computer audio as well. You might have to stop sharing and reshare.
Let me stop and then try to share it again.
There should be a button to share sound when you're about to click on what screen you want to share.
Oh, thank you, Vinny. All right, let's see if this works.
Hello, my name is Pete Dye. I'm the General Manager of the Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department. Today I'm here to share with you some information about an exciting project we're working on in conjunction with the Northeast Regional Vocational High School and the Wakefield Memorial High School. Over the next few minutes, you'll learn more about this project that will provide cost savings to our ratepayers, environmental benefits to the region, and educational opportunities for the students at both high schools.
The Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department is working on a project called Energy Park. It will utilize a variety of resources to service the energy needs of both schools, including solar, utility-grade battery storage technology, and a natural gas generator for emergency backup. The WMGLD will manage, own, and operate the Energy Park with ratepayers in mind, keeping energy costs low and providing significant environmental benefits in preparation for the future. Northeast Metro Tech and the proposed high school will have all-electric heating and cooling systems. The Energy Park project includes installing solar panels on the roofs of both schools, with the output economically serving the electrical needs of both schools. Any excess solar energy not used by the schools will be stored at the Energy Park's 5-megawatt battery storage system. The battery storage system will enable the schools and the ratepayers to reap the benefits provided by peak shaving and effectively manage energy costs, not only at the schools, but throughout the community. The project will also include the installation of electric vehicle charging stations capable of powering 10 vehicles at each school. The Energy Park will include a natural gas generator that will be used as an emergency power source and a capacity resource when needed. As a result, the 2 diesel-fired emergency generators that would normally be required will be eliminated, saving each school approximately $1.2 million in construction costs and providing additional environmental benefits. The Energy Park will help the WMGLD promote electrification, reduce carbon emissions, maintain low electric rates, and move forward in meeting the state's Net Zero 2050 goal. In addition to energy management, the WMGLD will enhance educational opportunities for students who will learn about energy management systems, solar arrays, and carbon reduction technologies. The Energy Park would be built on town-owned land on Hemlock Road, which will require an easement to be granted by town meeting. The plan has received the support of officials at both schools, as well as several town departments and committees, including the town administrator, town council, DPW, and Wakefield state representatives. Any trees that will need to be removed as part of the construction of the energy park will be replaced as part of WMGLD's comprehensive vegetation management and tree replacement program. The design has incorporated a 25-foot natural vegetation buffer in front of the property on Hemlock Road.
Thank you for taking the time to learn more about this exciting project. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at energypark@wmgld.com. So hopefully that provides a quick overview of the project. So some of the things we wanted to discuss tonight briefly are starting with the benefits of the project. So there's some key benefits that were mentioned in the video. If you want to jump ahead a couple slides, Joe.
Yep.
Obviously, from a ratepayer perspective, the use of the energy park as a capacity resource and from the solar battery system and the gas generator would all be used to help us manage our capacity resource needs. Obviously, the part of the investment comes from the form of reducing our need for gas at the site and increasing the promotion of electrification, which ultimately will reduce carbon emissions and move both high schools towards help move us towards our net zero 2050 goal. We're going to help reduce the construction costs of both schools because we are, by putting this energy park in the middle between the two schools, we're actually eliminating the need for individual diesel-fired emergency generators at each school. Emergency requirements at each school involve two levels of emergency support. The first is life safety, so that you can immediately evacuate a building if needed. And the second level is obviously emergency standby systems to prevent from freeze up or things like that. So the generator is required because the battery can't be counted on simply to provide both those resources for extended periods of time, especially in a winter if there was an extended outage. That's why the generator is required also. It will reduce the operating costs of both schools because we are going to be installing solar on both schools from the very start. Obviously, the majority of the output of the solar system will help reduce the energy costs at the individual schools. Whatever is excess will flow back to the energy park and be used to help charge the battery. We're also, we were just actually recently last week granted a grant from APPA for $125,000 to help develop curriculum for both high schools and help educate students on energy management and environmental education. And we're also going to provide vehicle charging for 10 vehicles at each school right from the outset. One of the requirements of the state's school building committees is that buildings be solar ready and EV ready. That's very, the requirements around that are very limited and very vague. What we have been working on with both building committees is that both buildings would actually start out with solar and EV right from the get-go. From a peak shaving perspective, the capacity value, if we look back at what we've been doing for the past several years with our generators and our battery, we've already to date saved about $5.9 million for the ratepayers in terms of shaving our peaks, both a capacity peak that's an annual measure, and also every month there's a transmission peak that we manage. So those resources are now 2 to 3 years old, each of them. And to this point, we've been able to save $5.9 million, and we're still obviously operating those. So part of the payback for this investment for the ratepayers is the estimated savings for the battery and for the generator assets. And we share that in this table. Probably a little bit over $1 million a year is what is anticipated that we'll be able to save from each project, and that will help pay back the significant investment. There's three parts to funding this project. Obviously, The anticipated total cost of the project is about $12 million. If we were to pay everything from the outset on that, that's what the ticket would be. But however, there's a bunch of different options that are being evaluated. The first part of it is obviously the two schools, like any customer, will have to help support the infrastructure investment, the conduit cable, everything that's going to.
Instead of like, you should go and do that stuff.
Hello. I don't know, Joe, if you could help mute for a minute. So there is an investment by both schools still, even though we are actually making some major investments and helping them cut costs. Each school will have to pay about $500,000 in infrastructure to get out to our infrastructure. So that's the school's contribution. We're obviously going to leverage ratepayer dollars. I talked about the capacity return for the ratepayers. We're also looking at different mechanisms to fund each of these assets. There's models that we can look at lease to own versus purchase outright. And so we're evaluating each of those options there. And there may be a lot of opportunities to reduce that $12 million upfront bill into longer term operational or lease payments. And then finally, we're obviously going to look at leveraging as much as possible from outside funds, the Inflation Reduction Act, the ARPA funds. Obviously, we just got a grant from APPA, and we'll continue to look at other sources of funds like that at both the state and federal level. We do feel that there are a lot of opportunities available for those funds. We've been working with an outside consultant who has a lot of expertise so far in opportunities within the Inflation Reduction Act and the ARPA plan. So we're helping to identify sources of funds within those. We've also talked to the state at a limited amount about potential opportunities with Mass DOER money. And also we've already actively been participating with Mass EVIP. And we've actually gotten some funding for the chargers that are going into the Wakefield garage already for our conversion to a partially electric fleet. And we hope that there's dollars available for some of this work as well. Again, I mentioned that we've already received a grant of $125,000 from the American Public Power Association to help develop educational programs. The deed board was very impressed with our application. Dave Polson, our engineering and ops manager, did a great job with that. And the funding will be used to support educational programs and training. We've had a strong partnership with both schools over the years, and we want to continue that. How do we select the location for the energy park? It's a pretty big site, and there were some key issues that were involved in how we selected this location. Part of it is that the need for a grid design we needed a grid in a location that involved both the resources as well as the switchgear to truly operate this as a microgrid technology. So we need the switchgear, the generator, the battery all working together to make sure that, on loss of power or on operation for a capacity resource or for the opportunity to run the buildings in a different way, all that switching needs to kind of work together. So that's why they're all kind of co-located in one location. We needed to make sure that they were actually between the two schools so that we can definitely reduce the overall cost of infrastructure. If we went behind, for example, if we went behind the tech, we would have more than $1 million worth of extra infrastructure you would have to install to even come close to making this work. Obviously, we're looking at two major building projects that are going on in a relatively short period of time. Parking at both sites is already very limited, and with construction going on, that's going to be even more so. So the amount of space that we had to work with was very limited to begin with. Again, the tech has a very limited open space, and we couldn't locate this too far from the center between the two schools without incurring major investments in conduit, cable, and infrastructure to make that work. The high school project in its preliminary design was also very limited. They're going to work on a very tight space behind the existing high school, and there's really no extra space that's available. We've met with them a few times now, as recently as last week, and they're very concerned even with the existing footprint. So taking an acre from that area would be very difficult. Topography and ledge also played a limiting factor in some of the areas. As you know, if you've driven down Hemlock, there are issues with ledge and topography. So that was another issue. Construction also needs to be done. Part of to make this project work, it needs to be in place when the tech is scheduled to open in the fall of 25. So we couldn't wait for one of the projects to finish, then install the energy park. It needs to be completed at the same time as the school, or they wouldn't be able to take advantage of the emergency backup resource that it's going to provide. So the construction needs to be done while both schools are in session. And then the selected location is centrally located close to the road. The area we identified, and we did consider a few different locations up in that area, had the least amount of ledge and also the most moderate in terms of topography. So again, from a physical perspective, the acre that we're talking about is on Hemlock Road. It's just short of the gate heading into the tech area, and it would be on the right-hand side. We did look at locations all along Hemlock. If you start coming off of Farm Street and work your way down, obviously the high school occupies that first section of land between the tennis courts, the baseball field, the high school, and all of that land is, there's a plan to continue to use that. On the backside, the same with the tech. So the area we had to look at was in the middle. There is an area that is already cleared due to a parking lot. But again, as I said, one of the restricting factors we have is that they're already going to be taking away a lot of spaces due to construction. So the last thing that either committee could endorse would be to take away more parking up in that area. Again, from the tech site, if you look coming down the middle is Hemlock Road. The new building will be up on the hill on the left side, and they have a detailed field design for the right-hand side. So that project and that land is already quite committed, and obviously a lot of that land is already currently in use. And again, as I've mentioned, one of the constraining factors on building projects like this is the fact that you're trying to do that, but making sure that schools are still able to operate and stay in session. So a lot of that, the field space that is going to be built after the other tech is taken down. Similarly, the proposed layout for the high school, if you look at the Farm Street coming off of that, the plan right now is for the new high school to be built on the existing Beasley Oval, and then ultimately the oval will be moved out towards the street. But as you can see from this drawing also, it's a very tight constrained area. And there's also some wetlands behind where they're going. So they're very limited to how far they can go back. And again, if you look in the middle of that drawing is the parking and across from Landrigan that we talked about. So again, in terms of the ability to site this, we were very much limited to the area. Joe, do you want to go back 2 slides for a sec, if you could? We were very much limited to the area between the gate for the tech and after you pass Landrigan. So that was the area that we were talking about. And then within that area, we had several surveys done, and we were looking at obviously topography, ledge, and that's how the area that we are looking at was selected. Maybe you'll talk a little bit about the electrical 1 line.
Yeah, so this is basically a similar map to what you just saw, just showing electrically how we would set this up. And the goal is to obviously make this a microgrid. So if power goes out, which is very rare, the schools will still be able to have power. And that'll be thanks to the energy park, which serves as backup generation. And the primary source of the backup power is the battery. And this is pretty unique because the battery will be able to power the emergency panels in the schools instantaneously. So the schools will effectively be on their emergency systems immediately, and we'll be able to transition them over to their regular service as well. And yeah, it's a very unique way of setting this up. And we're going to be removing the poles as we go along, and it'll be kind of be done in 2 stages, but the road will be all underground utilities as well when it's all done.
So this is the site plan for the actual site we're talking about. And I think some of the considerations we made, that this drawing includes a list of the trees that will be maintained in the area. We've looked at a couple of different designs, and we came up with this central driveway design, coming up the middle and having the generator on one side and the batteries in the other, and the switchgear, trying to minimize the impact on the site. Also, if you could tell from the bottom of this drawing, we run into an area at the back where it becomes steep with ledge and topography. So we're trying to manage within a very tight space, but we were able to identify about 44 trees that we were able to save. As we mentioned in the video, we're gonna have a 25-foot natural buffer where we're gonna minimize any tree removals in that area, to make sure that, from a streetscape perspective, a lot of the Hemlock Road is maintained, and that we minimize the overall impact. In terms of the project, we're obviously promoting electrification, and one of the key goals is obviously to dramatically reduce carbon emissions. The initial design of the tech was to have gas heating system, and that's kind of what led this whole effort off, that we really wanted them to consider electric heat rather than get natural gas heat. And to do that, we had to come up with this concept of the energy park. We've done an analysis of carbon savings. Joe can kind of go through what we looked at.
Yeah, so basically this is kind of a powerful visual here to show the different scenarios. You know, without the energy park and with their gas heating system, you can see on the left that there's significantly more carbon emissions from that previous plan. But then when we shift over to with the energy park and with the school going all electric, there's an increased electricity usage. As you'll see, there's a bigger yellow bar, but the trade-off there is, if you see the blue bar, which represents the natural gas emissions, is there's a huge difference. So that's the difference between a heating system and how much we're going to run the generator and the usage there. And as well, you'll see the vegetation is included there as well. It's 128 trees, which we're planning to replant. That's a lot smaller as far as if you're looking at the big picture. It's, as you can see, it's 3 metric tons of carbon per year, whereas the gas usage with the gas heating system would be 1750 per year. So in summation, it's a reduction for the tech. It would be a 1,300 metric ton of CO2 reduction per year. And then, even though the high school is in planning stages, we think that it should be a similar impact for the high school as well. So estimated 2,600 metric tons of CO2 reduction in the first year.
Obviously, even prior to this project, WMGLD has been very active in terms of vegetation management in the town. And that not only includes trimming and removing trees, but also replanting trees and working very closely with Dennis Fazio and the DPW and the town arborist to make sure that we're doing it in an effective way for the town. Just in the past 5 years alone, and we've planted more than this, but just over the past 5 years, we've planted 281 trees in conjunction with the town. And this project, although we do have to remove some trees, the plan is that we will replace all those trees probably and then some. We'll be identifying areas that both are from the town side, and also last year, you probably saw that we started a residential tree planting program. We were able to plant, I think, 60 trees last year, and we're going to continue to do that for the next several years. So during the first year of the construction of this project, we'll be able to replace the 128 trees immediately. Granted that they are, going to be newer trees, and we are taking down some mature trees. Over time, obviously, that will level out. And again, I think there are other steps that we will have to take in terms of getting the approval for the easement. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but we will be identifying other areas where we will be preserving trees going forward. So one of those is the potential use of the Burns substation. There's a substation, a 4 kV substation that's owned by the WMGLD. It's on Ballaster Street off of Albion Street. That station has been retired. It's WMGLD land right now. And one of the proposals we had, if we are able to build the energy park, then we wouldn't need to put any kind of other battery resource at Burns. So therefore, we could convert that into a park. We've had a preliminary design of a park layout, a green space. If you're aware of where this is, it's on Ballaster, which is off of Albion, and it's a very congested area. And the addition of a passive green park at this location would be a huge asset. We have several condos and apartment buildings around this area. So the WMGLD board voted to create this land use. If we're able to build the energy park, then we would convert this site into Burns Park instead of Burns Substation. We have some just schematic design, some renderings of what the site would, we'll just go through those quickly. That's an aerial view that's coming up the driveway. Again, as we come up that central driveway, you'd have the generator on the right. The inverters and the batteries would be on the left, switch gear to our left also. This would be more of the streetscape view. As you come down Hemlock heading towards the tech, it would be on the right-hand side. It would be gated. And, again, we're really trying to minimize any kind of cutting down of any trees on the street side as much as possible. It's another view from, I think that's looking up the street from the current guard shack at the tech. The article that is going to be presented at town meeting is an easement. Mike, do you have a sec? Do you want to just kind of go through that article if you could?
Sorry, a little slow on this end. Yeah, I'm happy to. So essentially, without going into the specific language, although I'll be happy to answer any questions, the goal is twofold in terms of the town meeting. One is, in order to gain an easement from the town on town-owned land, we need a vote of the town meeting, a 2/3 vote to grant an easement, which is shown on the plan there as easement area. The second objective is to authorize the town council to seek to file a home rule petition to allow for the grant of the easement, because when this 6-acre parcel was acquired in 1955, there was a vote of the finance committee to accept, or actually to purchase the land at a cost of $2,000 for quote unquote playground purposes. So under Article 97 of the Articles of Amendment to the state constitution, in order to do that, we need to gain a 2/3 vote by the state legislature to authorize it to do it. This whole process set up at EOEA, the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, to kind of provide guidance on that, but that's kind of a state level issue. But that's essentially it. So just to summarize it again, one vote by town meeting to allow us to use an area, and the second vote at town meeting, all vote requirement is, I believe, is that authorize the filing of the home rule petition, so that the land that was originally dedicated for playground purposes can be used for these purposes. That's it.
Some of the questions that we have received so far, we've kind of grouped a couple of them together. During the site evaluation, how was this location determined, and were non-forested options considered? Yeah, as I mentioned in the earlier discussion, we did really look at the entire length of Hemlock Road. We did have obviously some space limitations, and understanding the fact that both these schools will need to be operating as well as be in state of construction at the same time. They're very limited what we could do on the sites of either school. We also physically needed to look in between the two schools to maximize the value of the energy park. And so we're looking in that space between the high school and the tech, and obviously Landrigan and a parking lot are right there next. So we were really looking at that space just beyond it. And that's how we came to this space. We looked at the topography all around that, and we had to pick a spot that was the flattest possible that would minimize both the environmental impact and the construction impact. Would it be possible to locate the batteries next to each building and reduce square footage of the site? The issue we have with that is that we wouldn't be able to operate it as an energy park anymore and a combined resource. Also, again, the space at either site is extremely limited, so we're not really able to split the whole project up and spread it out. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, the whole idea is that it would run as an integrated resource, and it would work as one entity in terms of being able to dispatch for emergency use and capacity use. And then the funding of the project, I think we already kind of shared a lot of this information, a combination of contributions from the two schools for infrastructure, ratepayer investment, but that there is a return obviously on that investment, and then leveraging as much. We are at a unique time, and there are a lot more grants available today than there would have been even 2 years ago for work like this. And obviously there's a lot of opportunities for an interesting and creative microgrid type project like this. So those were some of the questions that we've really received so far. Beyond that, I think at this point, I kind of wanted to just open it up for either comment or question. I know we have several of the Wakefield Gas and Light board members are on. I don't know if they had any comments, and also encourage you to that if you don't feel like asking a question tonight, you want to just submit it to Energy Park at WMGLD.com. We'll obviously reply to you quickly.
Looks like we have a question from Christine.
You ready for me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions. If you want me to just ask a few and then let somebody else go, I'm happy to do that. But first of all, I want to ask, do you consider this part of the vocational school project?
We consider it a set. Obviously, this is going to be owned and operated by the WMGLD, but it was developed in support of the tech project. Again, the original tech school design had that building going gas heat, and we preferred that it would be considered, they would consider electric design, but to do that, we needed to offer an ability to make sure that they could do that. And that included, some, financial incentive to them, such as taking over the emergency generation responsibilities that made it worthwhile for them to consider switching from gas to electric. And again, the benefit of designing it this way was that it would actually benefit both schools. Again, even if the high school itself does not, I know we're teeing up the idea of a new high school in January in Wakefield. Even if that doesn't happen, and the existing high school is going to have to undergo significant renovation, and this project could still be a huge asset to that significant renovation.
Okay, well, I bring that up because, I've been very involved in we'll call it the Save the Forest and Build the Voc project. And the building committee is on record to the grantor saying that they would not need an Article 97 easement for their project, where they were specifically asked, and they specifically answered and said they would not need an Article 97 easement. So now we have an Article 97 easement, which involves more land to support the functioning of the school. So I'm concerned about that. I think it's great that you're doing an energy park. I mean, the design and all that you're thinking about is great. I couldn't be against it, but I am concerned with the additional land. And, you know, you talk about 128 trees, they're taking down over 2,000 trees. And so, you know,
Yeah, again, we can't speak for the tech or how that's being, we were just we're looking for a project that, again, would maximize the environmental benefit. And again, we really did try to consider other locations, but we do need to, we felt that this is the right location. So again, we're trying to, as much as possible, minimize that impact. Obviously, we're going to replace those trees. And as Mike said, as part of the Chapter 97 process, we are going to have to identify another section of land that would be offset that. And there is, I don't want to speak about a specific one other than the Burns Park, which is a portion of the land that would be offset. But there are other pieces of land that we will need to identify as being preserved prior to that home rule petition process. And
okay.
there's several under consideration.
Okay, if I may, I was told that you were planning on bringing this to the Conservation Commission.
That will happen after the town meeting as part of the next step for the home rule petition.
Okay, can you just share what you will be asking of them?
So
Go ahead, Mike.
the policy, I'm guessing you've reviewed it, but it states essentially that one of the criteria, so when the home rule petition gets filed, the OEA, as I was referring to before, conducts an evaluation and makes recommendations pursuant to their policy to the legislature and or the governor in terms of guidance for their action. One of the criteria is that the policy directs a party such as us to the Conservation Commission for a unanimous recommendation regarding the proposal. So we will be going to the Conservation Commission. That is part of the state review process. It's kind of a little, different than the ordinary process where you go to the Conservation Commission in advance for local approvals, but this is more of a state level approval issue.
Oh, excellent. So I'm really glad to hear you're going to go to the Conservation Commission for the purposes of the unanimous vote regarding the easement.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I'll let someone else take a turn.
Any other questions? Comments?
Yes, sorry, having trouble raising my hand. May I ask?
Joey, if you want to take down the screen and then we can.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. There we go. Go ahead, sure.
Yeah, no, this sounds great, and this information is really helpful to digest all of this. I do want to make it clear, there is, you are going to be taking down native forest, and you're talking about replacing trees in a degraded site already. So I just want the committee to be clear that it's not equivalent. You are losing all of the sustainable benefits and the carbon sinking benefits of that forest, and those trees you are removing and replanting a new one someplace else is just not an offset. So keep that in mind. I understand you have limitations with the site. I guess I also want to understand why we're having this meeting 3 days before the vote, and how this meeting was promoted.
It was promoted on Facebook. It was promoted on our website. There was an ad in the paper.
Okay, it's not on the town website, and one would think that would be important if we're going to take a vote. And I think a lot of people are not cruising the WGMLD website, unfortunately.
I do know that it's been discussed in several public meetings as well. It was on the town council's agenda earlier. It's been discussed with the planning board. So it's been
Finance committee.
discussed in other public meetings.
Okay. Could you just share also the current energy costs of the high school and the Voc, like annual energy costs?
What they currently pay,
Yep.
we'll have to publish. I wouldn't have that at my fingertip.
Okay.
If you send an email to that address, I'll have your email so that we can reply directly to you.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes?
Okay, is it for me again? Okay, thank you. Can you tell me the size of Burns Park?
Burns is about 8,500 square feet. So it's about just under a quarter of an acre.
Okay, so in terms of, replacement land that is of equal or greater natural resource value, that wouldn't do it for the easement.
We're aware it's a piece of it. What we're saying with this part is that it would actually become a passive park as opposed to a continued industrial use. We would have to put a battery there or some kind of other resource there. But if we're able to put the battery in the new location as part of our overall resource plan going forward, then we can retire the site and make it a green space. So I think in terms of the trade-off, it's a piece of it. Obviously, it's not equal yet, and again, as I mentioned, there are other sites being looked at to continue to fully offset the impact of this 1 acre.
Okay, but in terms of voters agreeing to this, we won't have that by Saturday, right? We won't know what else.
Well, what you will know is that we have to identify the land. We have to identify some offset, because for it to go to the home rule petition, an offset has to, but there are several options being considered. We haven't gotten that far yet because we have to get through this step first before we can go to any kind of home rule petition.
Yeah, I think in terms of the sequence of things, as far as, being a resident and looking to the expertise, and informed deliberation of a group like Conservation Commission, that would have been my preference, is to have them look at this first, ask these questions, really flush out, what are you doing for replacement land? And then once they've deliberated and made their judgment, then bring it to the voters. But what we're going to have on Saturday is people that, have varying degrees of ability to think through all of these issues, and it's like we're voting for the energy park, and we're really not voting for the energy park. If it was just a vote for the energy park, that would be different, but we're voting for the easement that sacrifices some town land for the energy park. And so I think that's going to get mixed up, and that's unfortunate that the Conservation Commission wasn't involved first.
We just, we kind of followed the format that the statute lays out, and then Article 97 and the EOEA layout for the process. So the Conservation Commission is part of that state approval. The EOEA process comes on the back end of the town meeting vote. That's the why. Your point is taken. I'm not disputing that. I'm just explaining how it lined up.
Right, I'm sorry, I did spend like the last 3 days looking at our Article 97 policy document from 1998. So I know the 6 steps that are required, and I know the sequence, and Conservation Commission is number 1. And that's before town meeting in terms of the sequence. It doesn't say that you can't go to town meeting first, but it is listed as the first step. And I think there's a good reason for that.
It's listed as the first step in the EOEA process and review. So if we're going to the EOEA, and that EOEA process is related to the home rule petition. No home rule petition unless we go to town meeting and get a vote to that effect. So it is on the back end of the town meeting. But I don't want to argue with you about your logic. I get that. I'm just explaining how the process is laid out and why we followed the order that we followed. Certainly not to avoid the Conservation Commission.
Again, the other issue is that from a time frame perspective, there's a fall town meeting and a spring town meeting. And we needed to hit this window of an already scheduled fall town meeting. And we actually can't wait for the spring town meeting. There's no opportunity to wait that long. If we're gonna meet the schedule that's needed to build the park with lead times for all the equipment, we have to be ordering equipment in the spring. And we can't wait for a spring town meeting to complete this process.
Okay, that's a really important piece of information. So you're saying in order to be functioning for fall of 2025, you're saying you need to order your equipment in spring of 2024?
Spring of 2023.
Spring of 2023. But so that's 2 years.
Within the next 5 months, we have to get this equipment ordered. It has 2-year lead. Some of the equipment has 180-week lead times.
Yeah. Okay, well. Maybe there can be a few more replacement opportunities identified between now and Saturday. Thank you.
Rowan?
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. Theoretical, what happens if the Conservation Commission looks at this when they do and has problems? How does that work?
So the Conservation Commission vote is guidance to the Executive Office of Administration, Environmental Affairs rather. And it's the EOEA would take, I can't speak for them, but I think it's fair to say that the EOEA would take the input from the Conservation Commission and factor it into their decision whether to recommend that the legislature approve the home rule petition and or that the governor signs it. So it's not neither the Conservation Commission vote nor the EOEA recommendation determines the outcome of the home rule petition, but it's guidance to at the state level as to what action should be taken.
Okay, thank you for that. So let me just try to understand. So the Conservation Commission's, what are they actually going to be looking at?
Yeah,
Let me ask it that way.
That's a really good question. So the Concom, it's non-jurisdictional land. There's no wetland. There's no order of conditions. A notice of intent that needs to be filed. No order of conditions need be granted. So the Conservation Commission is involved purely because and solely because the EOEA policy relating to Article 97 land says that you should do that. I know that there are other cities and towns that have similar Article 97 petitions or have done them without actually going to the Concom, even though the policy suggests it. But we're going.
I see. So in other words, having the Conservation Commission look at this, it is really a formality then.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd pick that word, but it's part of the OEA policy.
Okay, so basically they're not going to be looking at, conservation issues or land issues or.
Sorry, that was the second part of your question.
Yes.
I think that the policy involves, this is just me in my view, the policy involves the Conservation Commission from an open space perspective. What does the Concom think about it from an open space or a park planning perspective?
Okay, and my original question to that is, what happens, let's just say if the Conservation Commission doesn't approve of any of that? Does that matter at all? Does that have any teeth? Or again, is this just a a formality to get through the system?
It matters to the EOEA, certainly would matter to us too, but from a approval standpoint, a technical approval standpoint, it matters to the EOEA because they're asking for their input. And then the EOEA would take that input and whatever other input or perspective they may have and make their recommendation at the state level as to whether the home rule petition ought to be approved or whether the governor should sign it.
Okay, thank you. One other question, if you would. I don't really quite understand all the funding arrangements. Is the vocational school or the MSBC or A going to be paying for any of this?
So there's contributions from both school building projects for that infrastructure that we told you we think is about approximately $500,000 for each school. It's built within the budgets of those school processes to interconnect to utilities, and that's in any school building project. We've been able to reduce that cost a little bit because of this energy cost, this energy park, in terms of physical location and interties. But there's a contribution in terms of infrastructure that's common to any school building project.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So is this energy park exclusively for the high school and the vocational school?
No, it's also a capacity resource for the town, and it's going to benefit everybody.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Julie had a question?
Yeah, a question and maybe something to think about. Julie Smith Galvin, Town Councilor. So I've seen this presentation. I want to really thank the Light Department for preparing it and to doing this public hearing on it, not hearing, but public information session. And thank you, Peter, and the team for looking at other areas. I think that that's really important. And I do understand why this area certainly from a cost standpoint and a time standpoint makes sense. I think Eleanor said something that made me think, certainly cutting down older trees, you do lose the sequestered carbon in it. I wonder whether when we get to the point of that, or when you get to the point of that, whether there's any way for those trees, if indeed they are cut, to not be burned, because when you burn it, all of the carbon obviously goes out of them. So if there are ways to have it mulched or there are ways to, it basically keep that carbon embodied in the trees. So that might just be something to look into.
That's good. I mean, we're obviously going to have to put out a bid to remove the trees, so we could put that
Right.
as a requirement within the bid.
That's kind of what I'm thinking is, the carbon impacts might not be as high. I mean, and I have to say, I think, and the carbon benefits of this project are absolutely clear from an energy standpoint, but from a forestry standpoint, if there's any way to not exacerbate the burning of the trees and the emissions, that would be great. And again, I just want to thank you. When we found out that this Volk was going to be gas heated, you guys jumped into action. And I think that this is really going to be a benefit for the community. And hopefully we can work out the tree and the park area situation by finding, other areas. And maybe it's not a 1-by-1, maybe it's a 2-for-1 for the trees or something. But I feel like there's a solution here. So thanks.
Getting back to Eleanor's question from earlier. So the tech last year spent $410,000 on electricity, and they are not gas heated right now. They're oil heated. So I don't have any data on their heating costs. The high school spent $242,000 on electricity and $210,000 on gas, and they are gas heated right now. I hope that answers your question about that. Thank you to Vinny for crunching those numbers super fast. There was another question.
No, and Peter, I really appreciate your time and taking the time to do this presentation. It's been enormously educational, and I understand how difficult it was to choose a site. I do want to just be clear on the tree point, Julie. It's not just carbon sequestration. You have biodiversity there. There are a lot of birds, owls, creatures that call that area home. And once you remove the trees, you remove their habitat, and you also remove the soil. And that also is part of nature's stormwater mitigation. So as long as the town, I just want people to realize, go in eyes open and understand the trade-offs we're making. That it's, replanting a seedling somewhere else is not the same as, taking down a section of forest. And I'll also add, there's a high market value for trees that are virgin and not grown on plantation. They are far superior in construction, but so again, I just want to dispel this notion that we can save the environment by destroying the land, because that seems really common these days. But just, again, it's a sacrifice. It's only 1 acre. Maybe it's okay. I just want to point out a couple of things about the site that I want to make sure you've considered. One is, it's a pretty long run up to the school. Are you thinking, it sounded like you're going to put the power lines underground, and do you have experience doing that through ledge that has quite a bit of groundwater?
So the infrastructure would go into Hemlock Road.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's
And
what we
up
do every day.
The driveway and up the driveway there, okay.
They're actually gonna have, their contribution is to bring it down the hill to the edge of the property line.
Okay. And then it is on the site is on the north side of a hill, right? Like the sort of backside, you have that ledge that comes up. Are you planning to do solar there? Is that, gonna be the most advantageous spot for solar?
The solar would actually be on the roofs of the schools. There would be there's no solar behind the park. That's kind of ledge right there. Yeah. So we're not
Okay.
clearing additional trees for the solar there. The solar is actually going on the roofs of the 2 schools.
Okay, perfect. That makes a lot of sense now. Thank you.
Christine? Christine, did you have another question?
Excuse me. Yes, thank you. I was just looking back at the Article 97 policy, and I just had another question for the gentleman who was addressing that. Can you tell me his name? It just had initials on his.
Michael
Yeah,
McCarthy.
it's Mike McCarthy. He's our general counsel.
Okay, oh, thank you very much. Okay. Because and maybe you could just clarify what you said about going to the Conservation Commission for their judgment on the home, so you can move forward with the home rule petition. Because I'm reading here, it says, obtain a unanimous vote of the Municipal Conservation Commission that the Article 97 land is surplus to municipal conservation and open space needs. So my question is, will that allow for them to be asking questions about these issues of the trees and the replacement number and some of the things that Eleanor just raised? Are you expecting to, have, robust discussions with them about those issues? Or are you thinking it's going to be just a very limited, discussion with them?
So the level of discussion will be dictated by the Conservation Commission, but we will be prepared to discuss those issues.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all for taking your time. I don't know if anybody else had any comments or questions. I just want to make sure I gave everybody a chance. Again, this is being recorded, so if you know of anybody that missed the meeting that would like to watch this, it's just over an hour, it's about an hour long, so but I think we shared a lot of great information tonight. And Bronwyn, I saw you just put your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, what happens again if the Conservation Commission is going to be looking at those areas of what happens if they for some reason unanimously deem that this land is not surplus? I mean, what happens then?
Whatever their recommendation is will be taken into account according to the policy by EOEA, and that will advise their recommendations to the state legislature and or the governor as to what action they think should be taken.
Okay, it just still, you guys understand this, of course, much more than I do, but from my perspective, it does look a little bit like the Conservation Commission should be weighing in prior to any town vote, because wouldn't that make things messy as far as the town vote is concerned? For instance, if the easement is granted at town meeting, what happens if Conservation Commission comes in and has a real problem with some aspect of it? What happens then?
It's the same process as I just described. Their recommendation would go to the EOEA, and that would advise EOEA as to what recommendation they may want to make at the state level.
I see. And what would happen to an easement if it should pass at town meeting and the other entities say, gee, that we can't, the home rule thing isn't working for us? What then? What's plan B?
Plan B is that we wouldn't be able to build the project, so plan B, because of the timeframes that are involved, that the tech would end up going back to gas heat, and they would have to have a diesel fired generator.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, thank you so much for your time in clarifying that for me. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome for my part.
Eleanor?
Sorry, Peter, you've been remarkably patient. I guess the last piece I was sort of hoping you could help explain to me. You said by doing the energy park, we would save 1.2 million in construction costs because we would not be using the generators.
So each school, because of building code, each school needs a diesel fired generator.
Okay.
So that the savings of not having to put in those generators for each school is about $1.2 million for each school.
So is the cost to put them in to each school more than the $12 million? Is it like 13.2 million?
No,
Because-
no. So we're taking away that cost requirement from them by putting the emergency resource into the park itself. They would no longer have to have a generator because the energy park, the battery and the backup generator at the energy park would be providing that emergency resource. Each school, if the energy park didn't exist, each school is going to be required to have a 2000 kW generator. And each of that 2000 kW generator with installation costs, and it would have to be diesel fired and tested on a weekly basis, would be approximately 1.2 million. And that was based on estimates done by the design team for the tech. So
I agree, a diesel fire generator is not ideal. So it sounds like it will reduce the cost to the school, but in turn, the cost of the energy park will be $12 million in total. So there's not like a real savings to the town. It's an investment in our future.
yeah, but if we go back to that whole capacity resource benefit, that's where the savings is, because we're allowed to, we would be able to use one of the first slides we showed was the savings from running it as a capacity resource.
Okay.
So each month there's a transmission peak, and to the extent that we reduce our reliance on the system by running our resources, we reduce the cost to ratepayers. Over the past 3 years, we've been able to do that to the tune of almost $6 million. So that's where the payback to the ratepayers is going to come, by managing the park as an energy resource as well.
Okay. And what would you say is like the number of years to pay back on that investment? like when I've researched this, it's 10 to 15 years to pay back on a solar or this type of investment. What are you guys projecting?
Well, again, if it's a $12 million investment and we're able to save about 1.5 a year. So we're looking at about 7 years.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful.
Any other comments or questions?
Can I just thank you guys for your time? You've honestly been very, very helpful, and I'm delighted to see all the information you've provided. And, you know, you've been very direct in responding to our questions. So thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thanks, everybody.